Hey class, we're going to jump into the last video lecture before you take your CPT mock exam next week. So we're going to jump into that right now. I'm going to share my screen. All righty, here we go. So this one's it gets crammed in at the end, but facility layout, some legal aspect stuff. There are some pretty strict guidelines that are given both in the NSCA book and what I'll talk about in here. Just numbers wise, like inches, feet, distance, that type of stuff. I remember a few questions on it in the exam, but again, overall, I wouldn't like only focus on this. Now, if you think you've got everything else down and you're like, I just don't know facility layout, definitely look at it, make sure you review the numbers, look at your textbook, things like that. But just know that as we're going through, these aren't arbitrary numbers. They are important to put in. So facility design and planning. So let's say you're about to build a gym or putting together a corporate gym or kind of create your own, what's going on. So you have pre-design. So again, needs analysis, right? So what that means is figure out, you have to answer these types of questions like, who are going to be my clientele? Is it going to be athletes? Is it going to be rehabilitation? Is it going to be elderly, youth, things like that? Max occupancy. How many people can I fit in there? What location? Right? What programs and services am I going to provide? Some places are only gyms, think like a 24-hour fitness. And then you can go to a place called like Equinox, which has their own massage therapist. They might have a food area, that type of thing. So different services are allowed. Main focus, what's your mission statement? And then again, short and long-term goals. So very much the businessy side of everything, but you need to be able to answer those. Don't just jump in and think you're going to have it all figured out. Have a plan beforehand. And then there's the design. So again, the literal blueprint of the facility, right? Who's going to manage it, design it? Who are my health and fitness professionals, right? Like general manager, things like that, personal trainers. Looking at the health, safety, and legal codes. Again, in California right now, let's just use COVID as an example. That has a lot. You need to understand what the health and legal codes are versus, somewhere else out of state, a private sector gym. Those types of things are all going to be a little bit different. So having that background as well, making sure you meet those standards. Construction, again, just stuff gets built. That's about as simple as I can get with that. So once you've pre-designed, you've designed it, then things get built. Then you have pre-operation phase. So this is where you start staffing, you create your staff development, right? How many staff members am I going to have? What are going to be the required qualifications? How do I advertise to those, to not only the people I want to hire, but also clientele? How do I go through the interview process, scheduling, training, all these sorts of things, again, going on in the pre-operation phase. Required qualification. Again, when I was at 24-Hour Fitness, all that was required for a lifelong certification at 24-Hour Fitness was a bachelor's in some type of exercise science kinesiology degree. I could have stopped learning everything. And by their standards, I would have been qualified to be a personal trainer. Now that's great because I don't have to, that doesn't force me to go get more certifications, but is that the type of the ceiling of knowledge that we want our employees to have, right? So you figure out what those qualifications are. Okay, so here are some guidelines. Again, don't forget the numbers, but again, don't have to memorize all of them. It's the whole test isn't just these things. But passageway, so walking through, right? At least 36 inches wide. The floor's got to remain level or it must have a ramp. Emergency exit signs must be free of obstructions, right? You can't have emergency exit signs covered up, things like that. Natural lighting in windows, right? They recommend cardio machines near the windows, but also avoid glare as possible. Repair shop, be near a shop for large equipment. What we had at 24-Hour Fitness was a full-time staffer that would work on repairing them. But if you don't have that available, then be near somebody who can do it. Whether that's the company specifically or people close by. Water fountains, have them close to the entrance. They shouldn't be a distraction. First aid AEDs, those should be accessible quickly, especially in a fitness center, area because of the risk that you are taking with, high heart rate training, up and down off the ground, heavy breathing, sweating, heat, all those types of things. And then music and noise, again, they tell you below 70 decibels. So you don't want, now does every gym follow that? I don't know. Your gyms all might be a little bit different. Coated free weights, again, so that means when you drop them, it's not just pure metal hitting, hard floor or rubber floor. You have that padding around it. It still hurts if you were going to drop it on your foot, but there's that pad that makes it less intense. Electrical, again, having 110 and 220 volt outlets, just different outlets available. Additional outlets in the fitness rooms, right, for phone chargers, cameras, things like that. Temperature, they say between 72 and 78 degrees. Make sure there are ventilation systems. Okay, that's very important. You don't just want this musty air just sitting. If you go into any big gym, you'll see those giant air vents typically kind of sitting out, or a giant fan that's blowing through. Signage, make sure that's clear, right? The rules, your expectations, safety guidelines, where's the entrance, where are the exits? You have to communicate those things. Yes, some of it should be common sense, but common sense also isn't so common. So with that said, just be wise with that. Sorry if you hear some barking. My new puppy is being communicative right now. Communication boards, right? Things that are coming up, right? Whether that's a fitness challenge or, free assessments or, anything like that, membership bonuses, those types of things. Having telephones available, and then, some type of suggestion box. So comments, suggestions, everything's a little more digital now. So I think things like Yelp, your Instagrams, your social media handles, right? That's going to be a lot of that, not maybe a handheld one, but maybe still have one just in case. Floor plan and organization. Okay. So in general, you want to separate your cardio machines, your single joint machines, your free weights, your Olympic lifting platforms, stretching area, body weight exercise. And if you're going to have rehabilitation, put those all in distinct areas, right? So you wouldn't want a treadmill next to a weightlifting platform next to a squat rack necessarily, right? You'd put all the cardio together. You'd put the Olympic weights together. You'd put all the dumbbell racks together, right? So they have these areas, right? So people, one, it's safety, but two, it's clear where people need to go depending on what they're trying to accomplish. Group resistance training, that's that second point, based on targeted body part, or group resistance training based on the target body part. So like typically in front of dumbbell racks, for example, you'll have those benches, those adjustable benches, right? Typically for upper body movements, right? You'll typically have the squat racks next to each other, right? For lower body movements and things like that. You can also group based off of brands or manufacturers. Again, there's just a different way to do it. You might have Lifetime Fit, you might have, single joint exercises over here, multi-joint exercise machines over here. It all just kind of depends on what you're presenting as your product. Be aware of considerations for individual disabilities, right? So making sure that it is accessible to them in at least the best way possible, right? So making sure there's room between machines, getting in and out of or onto machines and things like that. Just things to think about as you're designing it. Maybe not just for you if you're a healthy, able to walk individual, but also those that might have disabilities. Placement suggestions. Okay, so some more of these kind of suggestions as we go through. Equipment that requires a spotter should be away from windows and mirrors. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but the idea is you don't want, because if someone requires a spotter, but they don't have a spotter, right? And then you have a risk of weights dropping or bouncing or racks getting pushed over. You don't want mirrors getting cracked and windows smashing and things like that. Taller machines are usually up against the walls. You don't want them in the middle of your facility to block view. So again, the bigger, higher things, if some type of wall or I'm trying to think of like a Versa climber, like the things that are taller, you don't want those right in the middle of your space blocking views. Dumbbell racks typically go against the wall. And then your smaller equipment goes in the middle. That might be like weight trees. So those little triangle pyramids with the weights on them, right? That could be in the middle. Again, separate area for stretching. Treadmills should have sufficient room around them. So you shouldn't have so close to each other. But we'll see some pictures in a second of just close areas. And then all exercise equipment should be places at least 6 inches from mirrors. So that might be a test question. I can't guarantee it on the actual exam. But again, you don't want anything closer than 6 inches. So you want some buffer between your equipment and the mirrors. So here's just an example. This is a 24-hour fitness. You can see treadmills are really close to each other. Look how they're grouped. So again, you have all of your, we'll call them the standard treadmills over here on the left. Then you have your sprint, your Woodway ones right here. And then you have your elliptical machines there. So they almost did it by brand and by function, right? You also have your Stairmasters over here. It looks like you got some more elliptical options over here, and then more treadmills down on this side here. So again, this is just kind of focusing on the cardio side here. So just looking how it's set up. Now they're pretty close to each other, but again, you have space definitely behind you, right? And hopefully enough space between, and you have space in between you and the other equipment as well. So God forbid something happens. Here's your Olympic lifts. or squat racks, however you want to look at it. So again, these bumper plates are used. Again, we talked about that rubber plating around it. That'll help keep it quiet. Let's just say you were doing cleans over here, for example, and it hit the mats, right? Rubber on, it's still going to make a noise, but compared to like metal plates that could break or make a ton of noise or chip off or things like that, we don't want that. But again, noticeably different. Now, again, I don't know if that's 6 inches. It's probably pretty close from the mirrors and windows, but again, just something to be aware of. Now, I know I said keep things that require a spotter away from mirrors, but if you also been to a 24-hour fitness, you realize mirrors are everywhere. So how do you do that? Otherwise, you know, it's a suggestion. I don't know if you're going to get doctor fined or anything like that. Here's those dumbbell racks. So again, up against the wall. And then you can see you put the adjustable benches up here. So things that can be moved, might be used for upper body typically, but also lower body. And then you have things that are a little more stagnant, right? So you have your different bench variations, decline bench, incline bench, flat bench. It looks like an adjustable bench there. And then you have more machines kind of on this backside. So notice how things are grouped together. It looks pretty clean, even though it's pretty chaotic at the same time. And then here's an open area. Some people might call it a functional training area, personal training area. But again, you have ropes and med balls or physio balls, tires, right? Sleds. So you'd want to keep this area far more open because you got a lot more movement potentially going on, right? You wouldn't put a squat rack right in the middle of it. So it's a separate area, right? Designating that. You got your plyometric boxes here as well. Equipment spacing. So again, 25 to 50 square feet per piece of equipment. So giving that much room for your equipment. 30 to 48 inches of clear floor space between equipment. Okay. So between your machines, ideally, again, you want some space around your area, just for safety reasons, grabbing plates, grabbing weights, things like that. These are from your book. So here's all the specifics that I didn't want to throw into you on this slide. But again, just looking at, again, they give you the formula for how much space is needed, and then an example of it. So we can just look at the first one. So bench press, lying tricep extensions, things like that. So the way they look at it, an actual weight bench length, right? 6 to 8 feet, plus safety of 3 feet on each side. By the actual bar length. So if they're using a bar for bar, right? So bench press, right? It'd be out here. And a safety cushion around that, 3 feet on each side. So you've got 156 square feet of space, ideally around your bench press. Now, if I'm trying to put as much stuff as in the facility as I can, I may not use that as for sure, but if you were asked this on the exam, that's the type of calculations that they're looking at, okay? Versus like a bicep curl and upright row, less space is needed, 100 square feet, and even something like in a back squat where the rack doesn't move, right? Or the rack's already set up, right? That one actually has even less, 130. Olympic weightlifting, notice this, 256 square feet. Again, also think about how dynamic that movement is, right? So a lot of stuff is moving around. The last thing you want is someone close to that bar or a machine or anything like that. Maintenance, okay? So personal trainers frequently, they're going to be looking at walls and floors and ceilings. Are things accessible? A lot of it I had to do was like re-rack weights, make sure they're in the right spot. Sometimes cleaning, depending on if I had the time. But they also have professional cleaners, maybe a full-time cleaner, depending on your gym, things like that. When looking at the floors, right? Inspect, maintain, and clean the floor regularly. Just make sure stuff isn't on the ground. You don't want people tripping over things, falling over things, hurting themselves. If you see a puddle of sweat or moisture, you don't want fungus and again, gross stuff. You want to try to get that clean, whether you have to do it or report it. Looking at the walls, again, windows, mirrors, exits, make sure those are all cleaned. Exit doors, right? You don't want, again, you have sweaty people in and out. Now, again, with COVID, again, even maybe more important, just making sure things are clean and sprayed down and things like that. Ceiling, big ceiling fans can sometimes get dust on them, right on the top. We've seen that at our homes. So just imagine what a gym might look like. So making sure those are clean. The lights, the AC units are working, TVs are clean, right? We don't want dust particles kind of falling on people while they're trying to breathe heavy. That could cause some issues as well. So just being aware of the cleanliness of the facility. Equipment, again, so in the stretching area, what might you have? A bunch of like yoga mats or mats used. Make sure those are sprayed down, right? Because people sweat on them, they lay on them for a while. Clean the area between the mats if you have mats laying down or on a rack. Body weight exercise area, again, mats and benches, right? They might use a bench for dips or for anything, step ups and things like that. Plyometric boxes should have non-slip surfaces, right? So if they're slippery, that'd be an issue. And then just any other equipment for functional safety. Make sure that things are set up and things aren't going to break on clients. Resistance training area, machine area, excuse me. So these are the machines. All of them need to be sprayed down continuously. The guide rods. So guide rods might be what goes into the selected weight, like a pin, right? You want to make sure those are cleaned. They don't get stuck or broken or rusty. You don't want loose bolts or screws. That can cause a whole bunch of issues, right? Just look at any gym fail and you can see that. You don't want weights to be cracked. And there's your weight pins. Keep your weight pins in stock in case you break one, you lose one, something like that. The free weight area, everything needs to go back. Again, I know it seems like common sense to re-rack your weights, but that's not everybody. They like leaving them around, reserving spaces, yada, yada, yada. We need to put everything back. Bench and rack welds inspected. So the welding on your actual racks or your benches that holds everything together, we need to make sure that those aren't falling apart. Dumbbells checked for damages. Depending on the type of dumbbell, they might have a hex nut on them. Most of them now are pretty solid, but still just checking that. Putting out of order signs on unusable equipment. Don't just letting bad equipment be used. And then padding should be free of cracks. So that might be under the squat rack or on the floor. We don't want cracks and things, right? Because then it loses its integrity. Your Olympic lifting area, again, the bar is lubricated to get weights on and off. The bar, again, not to get too crazy into it, but Olympic bars should rotate really smoothly because of the turn. So those should be lubricated, and special bars. Looking for gaps, guts, splinters, again, etc. on platforms, whether it's a wooden platform, right? You definitely can have those things. We don't want splinters everywhere or things breaking. No benches, boxes, or other clutter, so keeping the area clear. And then you have your aerobic exercise area. Areas that contact skin, right, should be cleaned often, wherever that is. Moving parts, again, 2 to 3 times a week should be cleaned. That's your belts on your treadmills, right? Or your bike, your bike pedals and things like that. Look for bolts, screws, belts, make sure those are all up to par, safe, and everything like that. Things are calibrated. So if it's digital, which a lot of things are, you don't want one treadmill saying one thing and one treadmill saying the other if you're running at the same speed, for example, right? So figuring out what your calibration is, and there are experts that do that. The companies have those types of people to do that. Keep extra equipment on site, again, if the budget allows. So not being down to zero, always having enough in case you need to make a quick change or to close something and repair it quickly. So being prepared as best you can. Legal aspects, we'll talk about this a little bit with personal training, and then we'll be done. Again, get those forms. We've talked about these forms. Again, assumption, this is covering your butt. Assumption of risk. So them assuming and understanding what their risks are. Filling out the waivers, any doctor's notes or recommendations, right? Having those on file. If you have the forms, it looks like it looks like it didn't happen. Sorry. So if you don't have these forms and something happens, you have no evidence, even if you can say, and it's true that so-and-so turned in their forms and yada, yada. If you don't have them somewhere on file, you can be held liable. So we don't want that. So make sure you have copies of those forms, whether they're digital, hard copy, photos, whatever it is. A couple different laws, again, just to intro you into this area. Criminal law. So again, this would be illegal, federal or state. Providing medical or dietetic advice. We talked about that with nutrition, right? You can't technically give dietetic services. You can make recommendations, but you can't be like, Phil, you're going to eat this, right? And you'll be healed. Because if it causes some type of issue, death, something worse, or I guess there's nothing worse than death, but health issues or anything like that, you could be held liable, right? Because it's not within your scope of practice. What is your scope of practice? Is the weight training, the program design, those types of things. Don't provide drugs or anything like that, even if they're legal. Again, testosterone, steroids, hormone thing, don't do that. It's not within your area. And then there's contract law, where agreements are breached. So use of releases, waivers, informed consent. So these are those forms that they filled out. You know, maybe they sign it for a certain number of sessions, right? That would be more contract law, less criminal law. Then you have tort law. This is wrongful acts. These can lead to death or personal injury. These are generally, if you've heard this term, claims of negligence. And this is probably where personal trainers can get in a lot of trouble if they're not paying attention, they don't listen to the clientele, or they don't look at the forms appropriately or listen to the doctor's recommendations, is where you can be considered negligent. Now, here's what negligence requires. Okay, this is also in your textbook, so I'm not just giving you this just because. You have a duty, you have a breach of that duty, proximate cause, so because of something you did, and then harm or damage occurs. Okay, and then negligence is the failure of one person to comply with a legally determined duty to protect another person, which failure proximately causes the other person harm. So basically, you breach something and that breach caused some type of harm or damage is kind of the idea, right? Potentially, you know, you're supposed to be spotting somebody, right? And you're going to go over safety technique stuff in your book. You can look at that. And let's just say you're supposed to, you know, eyes on them and you're supposed to grab the bar, but you're texting or you're talking to somebody and the bar falls on someone's throat, right? That might be negligent because you have a duty to keep them safe. You understand what that duty is. You breach that duty. If you were there, is it possible you could have saved them from that issue? Probably proximate cause. And then if you caused any damage to them. Okay, so that might be something that is negligent. The defense against it, adherence to, again, the industry standards, right? So if you're like, I followed all of the NSCA guidelines, right? And you can prove that because they'll have them posted or they're in your textbook. That helps defend you, right? Receipt of proper informed consent, right? So they have all their pieces of paper turned in. You don't just do it because they pay you on the side or anything like that. You get some type of information. Promises don't mean a whole lot unless they're on paper. Assumption and risk, again, by the client understands the risk they're stepping into. And then you have waivers that are given before activity. It's not something bad happens and then you have them sign a waiver, right? Get all of that done on the front end, and then you have yourself covered in case something happens. Ethical codes. So this is the NSCA's code of ethics. Okay. Discrimination on the basis of gender, race, religion, nationality, or age is prohibited. All clients must be treated equally and their confidentiality must be protected. Again, confidentiality is important, right? Not just talking about certain diseases or issues or family things. Again, confidentiality. Personal trainers should obey all relevant federal, state, and local laws, as well as all institutional guidelines, right? So following the laws both in your area and with the NSCA. Personal trainers should not misrepresent their skills, training, or certification, and should provide only those services for which they are qualified, right? Don't sell yourself on a certification you don't have. Even if you're going to take the certification, don't say you're certified in whatever. Someone comes to you, you are not qualified to do that. Okay, you can get in trouble for that. Personal trainers should avoid professional or personal behavior that reflects negatively on the NSCA. For instance, they should never place their own financial gain over the well-being of a client, right? Don't take money over the health and safety of somebody, right? So just being aware of those things. Hold yourself to a higher standard. That's what we're called to. And that's it. So I know we skipped some chapters, technically by the book, but I really think I think from the most part, this is what you need to cover for your exam. And again, your mock exam is on Canvas. It should be unlocked soon, and you have multiple attempts to take that. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Keep filling out those review exams. Again, you need an 80% or above to pass this course. So please do very well on that exam. If you have any questions, send me an email. Thank you guys so much. I will see you guys later.